Hello and welcome to AGTP Daily, where we discuss the most important tech stories in the US and abroad. Today is Thursday, the 26th of March, 2026. Let's get right to it. Okay, Meta buys Manus, but then what? What's actually going on here? I want to do a little bit of AMA in the middle, and then we will also be joined by Gabriela Mauch, the Chief Customer Officer and Head of ActivTrak Productivity Lab, to explore how companies are using data to understand AI's real impact on employee productivity and well-being. Okay, let's talk about Meta and Manus. You have heard of Manus. You know some of the story. But suffice it to say that Manus is not just another chatbot. And frankly, it's turning into much, much more than that. It's an AI agent platform designed to do work, not simply talk about doing work. Even on its own site and documentation, Manus describes itself as an action engine that can execute tasks, automate workflows, and act more like a virtual colleague with its own computer. In practical terms, that means it can research topics, generate slides, build websites and apps, work inside Slack, and even operate through a browser environment rather than just replying in a chat window. And that distinction matters because Manus sits in the part of the AI market moving from conversation to execution. That is the backdrop, and that is the reason why Meta wanted to buy it. Let's go back a little bit, a few months. Back in late December of 2025, Meta announced it was acquiring Manus, a Singapore-based, but important distinction here, Chinese-founded AI startup in a deal widely reported at around $2 to $3 billion, with Reuters citing this as roughly around $2 billion, but still it's somewhere between $2 to $3 billion. And let's be careful about this, right? So I said, based in Singapore, domiciled in Singapore, but Chinese founded. This is important, right? Because there is a strong relationship between Singapore and China. But Singapore is also, what's the right way to say? I always describe Singapore as like the Boston of Asia. It's very metropolitan. It's very forward-looking. It's very open. Its legal system is based on English law. A lot of companies, even a lot of companies outside of Singapore, but in the Southeast Asian region, go to Singapore to create their company, to be domiciled there. And part of the reason why is because the legal system there, it makes it so easy to start a company, raise capital, do all the things that early stage companies want to do that may be slightly more difficult in some of the other countries in the region, and also slightly more difficult than in China. And particularly the way the world is working today, Singapore, everybody loves Singapore. So if you're a Singapore domiciled company, right, if you're a Singapore based company, you kind of have no global problems. Let's just leave it at that. And Meta's logic for buying Manus was pretty clear. They had become one of the most visible names in the emerging AI agent category, a category many in the industry see as the next important layer after chatbots. And we've been talking about this for a while as well. Instead of asking AI to draft a plan, the bet here is that users will increasingly ask AI to carry out that plan. So you're going to do both of these things. What should this plan look like? Create a group of agents that you're going to manage, create an orchestration layer above those agents, and then have those agents go out and actually execute that plan for you with some human intervention in places where it just gets, let's just say, too complex or too unpredictable for the agents to be able to handle it themselves. And from Meta's perspective, that is strategically important. The company has spent a lot of time trying to ensure that it's not left behind in major platform shifts. I mean, boy, they even changed their name to Meta. We've been over this before. I feel like they should have changed their name to Agent or AI or something like that. Because in the current AI cycle, that means not just having a large language model, which Meta can do. They can probably get the technical chops or hire the technical chops to be able to do that. But having software that can turn intelligence into action, fill forms, navigate websites, compile research, produce work products, and integrate into business workflows. And this is actually really important. This integration into business workflows is super important, right? Because once a piece of technology is embedded into your workflow, it's pretty unlikely you're going to get rid of it. It's very, very sticky. And Manus offered exactly that kind of positioning. But, and this is why I said, like, Meta buys Manus, but then what, right? Because what's happened after the announced purchase back in December of 2025 is almost as interesting as what happened before it. This was never going to be just an acquisition story. And that is because Manus may have been headquartered in Singapore at the time of the acquisition, but has deep, deep Chinese roots. Reuters reported in January that Chinese officials were reviewing whether the transfer of Manus staff and technology to Singapore before the sale may have violated Chinese technology export controls. All countries, right, that are that are waging this AI war, they do have IP control mechanisms inside. They don't want their smartness, their intelligence leaving the country, going somewhere else and providing that value to somewhere else. Now, like I said earlier, Singapore does have a great relationship with China, but it just opens it up to the rest of the world because, again, Singapore's got a great relationship with the entire world as well. China's Commerce Ministry, after they started looking into this, then said publicly that would assess and investigate the acquisition for consistency with laws covering export control, technology import and export, and overseas investment. And to be fair, we've seen the same thing with NVIDIA chips and the regulation that happens from the US restricting the sale of those chips into China, at least the most advanced of those chips, right? So this is not just something that China does. You can't look at you can't look at China and say, they're doing this, but we're not doing it, or Europe's not doing it. Every country, every region, every area wants to make sure that they're not giving away their best information and their best intelligence. And it means that China was not treating this like a routine offshore corporate transaction. It was treating it like a sensitive technology transfer. And that brings us to today. Because some interesting stuff has been going on, right? And you have to pay really close attention to this. This matters, actually, particularly in the context of what's going on in the rest of the world today. As of March 25th, so as of yesterday, Reuters, citing the FT, reported that two Manus co-founders, Chief Executive Zhao Hong and Chief Scientist Ji Yi Chao, have been barred from leaving China while regulators review the Meta deal. Just put that into context. The two people that founded this company, that expatriated to Singapore, because they knew, I think, they had a feeling, wait a second, maybe if we stay in China and we sell our company to Meta, or sell it to anybody, we've created a ton of value, $2.5 to $3 billion of value for ourselves and for our employees if there are already employee stock options in there, right? We're going to have to domicile ourselves in Singapore because this is going to be a little bit tricky. They knew this, right, when they did this, for sure. And according to the reporting, both of the co-founders were invited to a meeting in Beijing with the National Development and Reform Commission, or NDRC. And after that meeting, they were reportedly told they could not leave the country, though they will remain free to travel within China. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? Go to Suzhou and see the canals there? I don't know. Visit Sun Yat-sen Park? I don't know what they're going to do, but they're free to travel inside of China. Maybe they want to get Szechuan food, just go a little bit further into the country. And that is the key fact as it stands right now. The founders are not under arrest or anything like that and are not reported to be in detention. They're not in jail, but they just can't leave China. I think this just shows how seriously China is taking this. Imagine if Sam Altman was told he couldn't leave the United States. Right? Imagine if Mark Zuckerberg were told he couldn't leave the U.S. You could travel freely. Feel free to go to Boston. Feel free to go to Miami. Feel free to do whatever you want. But you can't leave the country because of some IP issue or because of some corporate acquisition issue. Reuters also reported that Manus has been seeking legal and consulting support to deal with this matter. But to be fair, Meta for its part, has said that the transaction complied fully with applicable law and that it expects an appropriate resolution. Sure. Sure. What else are they going to say? Oh, darn, we got caught violating Chinese law. Now, what are we going to do? This is never going to be the way this is going to happen. But the way this is going to get resolved in my mind, and we'll get to this later in the conversation, but the way this is going to be resolved in my mind is by that commission. The Chinese government is going to decide this, and they're not really going to care about anything else. And the main thing that they're going to care about is, are we giving away our intellectual property for just a couple of $1 billion? And why does this matter beyond the obvious human drama of founders being caught in what looks to me like a geopolitical squeeze? Because it's not really just about these two entrepreneurs at all, actually. It's about whether artificial intelligence talent, AI intellectual property, and AI companies can move freely across borders once they become strategically important. And this is the big question, right? How do you determine strategic importance? Well, in 2026, literally anything to do with the power of artificial intelligence, whether it's chips, whether it's GPUs or CPUs, or server design, or data center design, or LLM design, any of this stuff is now going to be considered strategic from a US perspective, from a Chinese perspective, and from a European perspective, right? And also where the data lives, all this data sovereignty stuff is going to be considered strategically important as well. That's why it's not just about these two founders. And let's dig a little bit deeper, because for years, many startups operated under the assumption, this is true for the United States as well, right? That if they incorporated in Singapore, if they incorporated in Delaware, or some other international structure, that they could position themselves as globally mobile companies. And my guess is that Manus probably didn't do this early enough. That's my feeling here. Right, because I was on the phone with a guy from Agnes AI. I believe he is also Chinese. He has been incorporated in Singapore, I think, from the get-go. And I think part of the reason why companies do this is because they want to be as globally mobile as possible. But the Manus case suggests that depending on when you incorporate when you change your incorporation in Singapore, when you move your domicile to Singapore, it depends when you do it in the life cycle of your company, how much influence your company has, how strategically important it is, right? And in this case, this idea that any company, if they incorporate in Delaware or in Singapore or some other place like that, where it's very easy to like set up a company, the assumption that you're going to be now a globally mobile company clearly has limits. And if a company's core technology, engineering talent, or early development history is rooted in China, and to be fair, even if it's in America too, it may, but in this case, we're talking about Manus because it started in China, may still view it as part of China's strategic technology base, regardless of where the holding company sits on paper. And this is the key here, right? Because they did reincorporate themselves in Singapore. But in this case, it's like, how much does it really matter? And my feeling is this. Let's say this was an ed tech company. Let's say it was a logistics company. Let's say it was an e-commerce company. Let's say it was a B2B e-commerce company. How much do you think the Chinese government would care about this? You could incorporate yourself in Singapore. You could incorporate yourself in Delaware. And then if you sold yourself to Amazon, I don't think they'd care, particularly for the categories that I just mentioned. But China appears to be drawing a line here. In the artificial intelligence war that's taking place right now, some assets may be too important to leave without at least some kind of scrutiny, without looking into it at some level, right? Like, how important is this company? How great is this company? And how strategically important is it to us as a nation to maintain to maintain the IP inside the country and to maintain control over that IP as well and the development of that IP, this intellectual property? This is a really important thing. And that makes this Manus story bigger than Meta and bigger than one acquisition. It signals that advanced AI agents are now being treated less like ordinary software products and more like strategic, sensitive infrastructure. We don't have to go into where some of these agents could be used. You could do the math yourself. You can figure out where a country that is strategically important, that's a global superpower, would want to be able to maintain use of really powerful agentic AI and not let anybody else know how this is being developed. And sure, there's plenty of agentic AI being developed in the United States, but the way you build something is almost as important as what you're building, right? How do you get to the outcomes that you want? How easy is it to iterate around this stuff? The software design maybe could be really important here as well. And this idea that this technology is strategically sensitive infrastructure, this is a major shift, right? Major shift, particularly coming out of China. Not too long ago, most public debate focused on chips, semiconductors, and model weights. I mean, that was, when we say not too long ago, when I say that, I mean like 6 months ago. Right. And again, I mentioned earlier, the chips, NVIDIA has the same problem that Manus is having, except that Jensen Huang can travel wherever he wants. Right. He's not restricted in his travel. I don't know what he's doing with that leather jacket, but we'll leave that part of the conversation for another time. And what this case suggests is that applied agent systems, the place where Manus is apparently excelling, the software that can actually go out and do stuff and get stuff done, may now be entering this same sort of strategic geopolitical category. And there's also a second layer here. But I love second order stuff. The first order stuff is obvious. We can talk about that forever, but the second order stuff is actually important too. Manus is part of a broader trend in artificial intelligence, from just answering questions to action engines. A chatbot can summarize a contract, but an agent can go find the contract, pull related emails, compare clauses, draft a revision, populate a workflow, and send it to the next step for approval. It can act like a human. It can act like a paralegal. It can act like anything you want it to act like, right? And you can also give it restrictions and permissions and stuff like that in a way that, unless it gets really cheeky on its own, which we've had experiences where this has happened, it'll only do the stuff you tell it to do. Sometimes it won't 100% succeed. We've been over that before as well. But it'll just do what you want it to do. And that makes agent companies more commercially powerful but it also makes them more sensitive. Because the question is, once you have the ability to do agentic AI at scale, and in a way that's really strategically important, you have to be careful. This stuff can get really sensitive. The closer software gets to actually being involved in real economic activity, the more likely governments are to care where that software is built, where its data flow goes, and who ultimately controls it. You know, in a way, for Meta, which is like one of the most powerful tech companies in the world, this is awkward, but very instructive. I don't think we can have this conversation without saying that I feel like Meta is in a big transition phase. I really do. For the longest period of time, Facebook as a thing, as a platform, dominated. And for those of you that live in the United States, you know that it dominated your life for, I don't know, a good 7 to 10 years. Maybe a little bit more. But there was a time where like young people wouldn't go on, and it was more of an older platform, which is perfectly fine. But it was still one of the largest advertising engines in the United States, right? Competing directly with Google for ad dollars and for your attention. But what you don't know is, if you don't live outside the United States, is that Facebook had become like the fabric of society and for economic activity, particularly in places like the Philippines and in Indonesia and even in Thailand, where a lot of actually e-commerce was taking place on the Facebook platform. But that was beginning to get disintermediated as well. And fewer people were using the platform, I think, in all regions in the world. And I think Meta was starting to get scared. And that's why they did this whole metaverse transition a few years ago. But they were 100% wrong on this. Now, Meta throws off a lot of cash, and they have a lot of resources and a lot of great engineering resources. But they saw this AI thing coming. But you have to think about this. They see the future coming, and they know they're not involved. And I think they're making this kind of moonshot effort to say, hey, look at us over here too. Right? Because Apple, easy. They're a massive device company. They have 2 billion devices out in the wild. They can partner with somebody like Google and they can put Gemini on their devices, and they can do artificial intelligence until they're blue in the face. Companies like Anthropic and companies like OpenAI, they're AI native. They've been doing this forever. And even Google itself, right, which again it's a search engine, but it's one of the biggest ad platforms in the universe, to be fair. But they've been doing artificial intelligence research forever. They just have, right? Because they've been building it into all of their own systems internally. It's something that they've cared about since as long as I can remember. So for Google to transition into an AI company, I don't think it's actually that hard. But I think for Facebook to actually accomplish this, it's going to be really hard. And that's why they went out and bought this. The company, Meta, wanted a frontier AI agent capability. Instead, though, it appears that they've acquired a test case in cross-border AI sovereignty. And this is a completely different conversation, because even if the deal ultimately goes through cleanly or already has in corporate terms, the political message from China is unmistakable. You may be able to buy a company, but that does not automatically mean you can move its key people and technology out of China's orbit without scrutiny. That's a big deal. And for founders across Asia, especially in Singapore, Hong Kong, and China-linked startup ecosystem, that lesson is probably even sharper. If you're building an AI, jurisdiction is no longer just a tax question or a fundraising question, right? This is another reason why a lot of people move to Singapore, because tax treatment is just so much clearer. It's all English law. It's easy to understand. And the fundraising there is pretty straightforward too. There's some pretty large venture capitalists there, but also corporate structure, building a corporate structure there, building a holding company to hold assets in the entire world is very easy to do in Singapore. They're very forward-looking there. And in this case, it's all becoming a sovereignty question. Where do your engineers sit? Where your code was written? Where your data lives? And where regulators believe the real center of gravity is? All of that now matters. And that's not going to go away. The Manus case may become a reference point for how governments handle future sales of strategically important AI companies. But what it also means to me, and I said this earlier, but just to reiterate, it also means that if two guys or two gals or one guy and one gal in China have a big idea, they're probably just going to quietly pack their bags and move to Singapore before they even start. They actually may move to Hong Kong, or they may move to Delaware. They may incorporate in Delaware right from the get-go. Again, you have to understand this. An AI company in Thailand reported that they raised $100 million. We actually did a little bit of AMA on this on our other show. Okay? company's called Amity Group. They raised $100 million again to build an agentic AI company. They are, I believe, domiciled in Singapore, but Tai founded, yeah. But they raised $100 million bucks. And there was so much fanfare around it, so much fanfare because $100 million is a lot of money. But OpenAI raised $110 billion, a factor of 10 higher, okay? So just think about the amount of resources that are available. So again, China, plenty of capital. Singapore, plenty, but like not the same scope and scale as there is in the United States. And what you may find is that, the two guys in the garage, metaphorically, are probably not going to stay in China if they have global ambition. And frankly, instead of going to Singapore, they may end up going to Delaware. Because once they're there, instead of raising $100 million bucks, they can raise $1 billion. They can raise $100 billion. It's just a different scale and scope. And if this case is going to be like a test case for, I would say like startup sovereignty, it could have impact going forward. We don't know like what's going to happen in this particular case, but what we do know is the confirmed picture is here. Meta announced their acquisition in December of 2025. China opened a review a month later in January 2026. And as of today, the 26th of March 2026, the co-founders have been barred from leaving China while that review continues. Meta says the deal completely complied with the law, but again, what are they going to say? And the full legal basis for the travel restriction has not been publicly detailed in full, and the final review of the outcome is still uncertain, but the broader conclusion is obvious here. We can already see what it's going to be. But just imagine the two founders getting kind of summoned to Beijing to talk to the Chinese government. I mean, I don't know how scary that might have been, right? Here you are, like just, I wouldn't say quietly, but diligently building something. You feel like you're building something good. You're starting to get some really great attention. You're starting to get some really good traction. You're doing the things that everybody dreams about doing when they build a startup. Your name is out in the news. I mean, the same thing happened to OpenClaw, different scale. Like you're building. And sometimes when you're building a company, it feels like you're building in a vacuum. Because there's not a lot of attention. Like a lot of people say, and I want to reiterate this too, a lot of people say like the biggest problem for any startup is product market fit. Does the product that you're building, does the market want it? But for me, I think you can have the best product market fit in the world, but discovery, I think, is the biggest problem. How do I even know you're there, right? How do I know you're there? How do you make it so that people understand that your product is out there and that it fits into the market in a way that they want to? How do you get discovered? And I think what's going to end up happening is these guys, felt like they were living the dream a little bit, right? They were discovered. They had enough capital. They had a really great product, according to all reports. But why does this matter now? Well, Manus matters because it represents where AI is going, right? From chat to action, from researching this to actually doing the thing that was implemented by that research that you did, and from assistance to execution, right? From some really kind of cool demos to operational software. Again, this is the whole conversation that I had yesterday with with the founder of Agnes AI, Bruce Yang, from my AGTP podcast show. You should watch that. You should watch that as well. It's on YouTube, AGTP podcast. And the Meta Manus Sagna matters because it shows that once artificial intelligence reaches that level of capability, governments stop viewing it as just like another, wow, we have another startup success story. Our country is better than your country kind of thing. Like we're competing in this thing. It's kind of friendly. We're building startups. You're building startups. We have a big valuation. Your valuation's bigger. We just raised some money. All this kind of stuff, right? But once it becomes like really important and reaches that kind of high level of capability, it's no longer this happiness conversation. It's more just like, uh-oh, now this is strategic power. And that is actually the real story here, okay? And I don't think this thing is going to go away. Meta thought it was buying an AI agent company. What it may have actually bought is a front row seat to the next phase of the AI Cold War. I want to do a little AMA now, and I think there's a bunch of really exciting stuff happening here. I was looking at Twitter earlier, and I saw this post from Winston Weinberg, excited to announce our latest funding round at $11 billion valuation, led by GIC, Sequoia, and a bunch of other VCs. I want to comment on this, right? But let's just to give the details here. They announced that they raised $200 million at an $11 billion valuation, right? So Harvey is a company that it's in the legal space. And I think this is important for a bunch of different reasons. They offer AI tools, right, for the legal and professional services that can streamline contract analysis, compliance, due diligence, and even litigation. If you think about just how specifically document oriented the legal industry is, imagine attaching AI to it. Imagine all the work that like paralegals do and like first year law graduates do at some of these gigantic law firms. And imagine how much of that could be automated. Again, not just firing these people that are doing this work, but how much more work they could possibly accomplish by being part of the orchestration layer that the artificial intelligence does. And one of the key things here, there are two key points that I want to make at least, right? One of them is that it's proof positive that an AI startup that's focused on specific industries are still able to get traction, even as companies like OpenAI and Anthropic try to build tools for every industry. But here's what I think is going to happen. In the same way that people were always worried, right, that Google was going to get into the travel business, that they were going to compete with the Expedia, that they were going to compete with Agoda and compete with Booking.com. It never happened. And part of the reason why it didn't happen was because you could not build this Swiss Army knife of a company that participated in every vertical. Because you can't be great at everything, but you can't be just so at all the things that you're doing. You have to be great at one thing. Be great at one thing. Okay? I mean, even in sports. Okay, so Deion Sanders played baseball. So did Bo Jackson, if you know who those guys are. But that's so rare. And so for a company like Anthropic, for a company like OpenAI, to go out and build all of the tools necessary to have like this legal infrastructure company that focuses only on the legal industry is just going to be really hard. They have their own problems already from from building like dedicated services just for themselves. We said this yesterday or the day before. They have 4,500 people at OpenAI. They may have 8,000 by the end of the year. And part of that is they can't even accomplish this stuff that they're trying to do now. And from a profitability standpoint, we don't have to talk about this. I think they're losing 17, 18, 19 billion dollars a year. So then they're going to go out and try to compete with a company like Harvey that's only doing stuff in the legal space. Give me a break. I don't think this is going to happen. I want to make one more point about Harvey, and then I want to move on because there's some other interesting stuff going on out there. Sequoia participated in this, A16Z, Kutu Management, Conviction, Evantic Capital, Kleiner Perkins, and GIC. And I wanted to put GIC in there because a lot of the people that are actually watching this right now may not know who the Government Investment Corporation of Singapore is, but one of the biggest sovereign wealth funds in the world. Okay, so you can just see that these are not small investors. And they're not like random investors too. You've heard of Andreessen Horowitz. You've heard of Kleiner Perkins. You've heard of all these other companies here. And adding GIC into them, you've heard of Sequoia as well. But adding GIC into here, I think, is actually super important because it means that this is a global investment. And GIC has been a very, very savvy investor for a long period of time. But I think that's the significance, at least at the beginning here, of what's happening with Harvey and why this matters so much and why the market's talking about it. Okay. Let's move on. So Brett Taylor was saying that Sierra is now releasing something called Ghostwriter. This is an agent for building agents, okay? And this is kind of cool. According to his post on Twitter, you can create an AI agent for your customer experience, one that can chat, pick up the phone, do all this other stuff, speak dozens of languages, right? This is the other thing. Imagine an AI agent that you need to do some research, but that research is about a company in Indonesia, and you don't speak Bahasa, Indonesian. There's a lot of English in Indonesia, but you don't speak Bahasa. But you can ask your AI agent to go out and do it with no extra effort on your part. So this idea of like speaking dozens of languages and doing all this stuff, it's just so powerful. And Codex and Claude, we've talked about this, right? So the product from OpenAI and Opus 4.6 from Claude have transformed the way that software gets built, making it possible for software engineers, according to his tweet, right, to orchestrate and review the work rather than doing all the work themselves. And this is really important. I'll tell you why. Because there have been plenty of places, and we'll keep talking about this. Aaron Levy actually said something great about this, and we'll get to that too. But the key here, I think, is that, who was it? Mark Andreessen said that software was going to eat the world, and he was right. And now he probably believes that AI is going to eat the world. But let's combine these two things into one thought, particularly when it comes to Codex and Claude Code. And here's the reason why. big, hairy problems, really big, sophisticated, complex problems, made it worthwhile, particularly if there was some economic value at the end of this, to develop software to solve some of those problems or to disintermediate some of those problems. Right? Look at some of the massive CRMs out there. Like, look at what Salesforce does. Okay? They went out and built this gigantic, monolithic, how can I help you system. SAP, the same things. Think about some of the biggest sort of systemic things that are out there. It made sense to sit down and hire engineering teams to build this software and write this code, because at the end of the day, if you succeeded, the economic payoff was huge. And this is, we'll get to this with Aaron Levie as well, because he makes a really good point here too. And I'm trying to combine these two things together. But part of the significance here is that it meant that in some cases, it wasn't worth writing the software, because the business opportunity outside of your own sort of efficacy and your own efficiency wasn't really worth it. But now, because writing software is now so much more efficient, so much easier. And again, he's making the point here that they've built agents that build agents, okay? And that there's no clicking, no forms, no menus, no nothing. These agents are building agents, but they also can build software for you. And we'll get to that when we talk about what Aaron Levie said. But this is really, really important. And here's the other thing that he's mentioning, and we've mentioned it before, but let's be explicit about it. Rather than every enterprise app having a web app for humans and an API for automation, and I love the way he's phrased this, every software platform's UI will be an agent that can do the work on your behalf. And this is this little phrase that I say all the time. AI is now the UI. And this, I think, is what this is about as well. Okay. This is great. I saw this as well on Twitter. Anu Bonthapalati writes, I love when Philip Johnson, who's actually been on one of our shows. We did this show called E-Commerce Undercover when he was running a different company, and he was on the show as well. We've spoken to him not in person, but online. Permitting is going to be a huge revenue driver for data centers. I heard a statistic yesterday that there are more data centers now being built in the United States than office space. That's a massive change. That's not what this post is about. But this is actually pretty important. AWS is, according to Jack Kerr, right? AWS is staring down a 5-year delay to stand up a data center in Europe. And that's billions of dollars of lost revenue. Now, why is this important? Or what matters here? Well, let's just read through this, right? Pamela McDougall, AWS's head of energy markets and regulation in EMEA, said the timeline for getting a grid connection, so being able to actually put power into your data center, or maybe into anything, has become one of the biggest deciding factors in the company's data center investments. Connecting to the transmission network, the energy grid in Europe can take up to 7 years. 7 years versus the roughly 2 years it can take just to develop a data center. So what are you meant to do in the intervening 5 years when you've built the data center with the most important, most significant, most complex, and most sophisticated technology? You can't even plug it in. It's, in a way, it's probably not worth building, and I think that's what the point is here. In the United States, where there will be power problems, right? This is one of the reasons why SoftBank is making gigantic investments, billions of dollars of investments in energy in the United States, because it knows in specific places where data centers are being built that they're going to run out of energy. This is going to be a big problem, right? But in the US, the connection queues are averaging 1 to 3 years. Okay. Fair enough. And you have to remember, the data center capacity is being built so fast, not just in the United States, but globally, to handle all of the things that's going on in artificial intelligence, that it's just going to be difficult for the grid to catch up. And we're going to need to be able to get connectivity faster to the power grids. We're going to need to build more power as well. We've spoken about this before. But if Europe is taking 7 years to build a data center, and not 7 years, but 7 years to connect to the grid, 2 years to build a data center, it probably takes the same amount of time in the US to build a data center, but way faster to connect it to the power grid. And look, we know this. The regulatory state in Europe is way more difficult than the regulatory state in the United States, and way different than it is actually in Southeast Asia as well. But you can't build a data center in 2 years and then wait 7 years, 5 more years, to get it connected to the power grid, because then what's the point? And I'm not commenting on what AWS is going to do or on what Philip Johnson's going to do. He's building stuff in space. I mean, he doesn't have to connect anybody's power grid. He can make his own power. My guess would be solar power. You just put panels on the satellites and you can build data centers in the sky. I think they just got approval for, I can't remember the exact number, but a lot. I think the FCC just approved StarCloud for a bunch of stuff. But the point here is this. One of my friends once told me, so one of my friends who lives in Southeast Asia with me, it's not important who it is, but one of my friends here said his brother came to visit him. And he said when he came to Asia, he felt like he was visiting the future. And when he went back to Europe, he said he felt like he was visiting the past. And I think this is why. Okay. Let's talk about Aaron Levie, because I think this is interesting. We're actually going to read through a little bit more of this because he's just so good at this. He's so thoughtful. And because he's built real stuff. Javon's paradox is, let's read through this, right? Is happening in real time. Companies, especially outside of tech, are realizing that they can now afford to take on software projects that they would not have been able to tackle before, because now AI lets them do it. Okay, and this is the connection that I want to have to what Brett Taylor was saying as well. Those guys are saying that they've built agents that build agents. This is really important. But here's the second order level of importance as well. The world is going to start to use software for all new things in the economy because it's incrementally cheaper to produce. Like marketing teams at big companies will have engineers helping to automate workflows. Engineers in life sciences and healthcare will automate research. Small businesses will hire engineers for the first time to build better digital experience. And this gets back to the point. He made this point. I saw this, and this made me start thinking about this. This idea that there are so many other places where software could have been built, but it wasn't because it didn't make any economic sense. You didn't want to hire a team of 10, 20, 30 engineers to build something that only you were going to use because it didn't create enough economic value at the end. But now, building software is just becoming so easy. And he goes on to further make the point, and as long as AI agents still require a human who understands what to prompt, how to review when an agent goes off the rails, how to guide it, right? How to fix it, we still have humans managing these agents. And actually, this is the key point that I want to make too, because he's having two thoughts here at the same time. The first thought is that we're just going to be using software in way more places than we've ever used it before. Again, getting back to what Mark Andreessen said, software is going to eat the world. Sure. But there are parts of the world that it couldn't eat at all because the chunk that needed to be bitten off was too big without any of the, what's the right word? God, I wanted to make an analogy. I wanted to make a metaphor, but I can't think of the right thing. With none of the available or the necessary nutrition to make biting into that thing possible. Just imagine an apple the size of your bedroom, but it had no nutrients in it. But now you can take a look at that apple and put all the nutrients in the world you want in it because biting it is just so much easier. And I think that's the point that Aaron Levie is making here, is that building software is just so much more efficient and so much cheaper today that you can now attack problems that you couldn't attack before. But here's the thing, and he says this in a way that's so much more elegantly than I can. And this is why he says, this is why all the advice you get of not going into engineering, meaning people say, don't become a software engineer. This is a job category that's going to go away. He believes this is completely wrong, and I agree with him completely. And why is that? Because the world is going to be increasingly made up of software. And the people that understand it are going to be in the strongest economic position. This is what he's writing. I completely agree with this. And here's the thing, and I'm going to keep saying this on any time I talk about artificial intelligence. Technological transformations are scary. They're particularly scary for humans. And they're particularly scary when the news media is out there saying everyone's going to lose their job, everyone's going to get fired, and there's just going to be massive unemployment everywhere. When the reality is that every new technological transformation that's happened, not just in my lifetime, but before and going forward as well, is just going to be a massive opportunity for employment. It just is. Go out and find me an example of where technology created millions and millions of job losses and that it lasted for decades at a time. There is just no historical precedent for this. But the point is that because writing software is going to get easier, you're going to have people who understand what that software is doing and what it needs to do, build it, design it, and work with it. And I want to make one more point because I've made it on my Asia Tech podcast show, on my ATP Insight show, but I want to talk for 1 second about agentic autonomy. There's all this noise around agents are going to be 100% autonomous. Think about your own company. Think about your best employee or your best employees if you're a manager, or even if you are that best employee, think about how you interact with your manager. I would submit you don't have 75% autonomy, maybe 80. Think about like the big decision situations. Should we invest in this thing? You can't just sit there at your desk and make like $100 million investment without having some kind of meeting, right? You're not 100% autonomous. And in no case where agents are doing significant or complicated work, where they're involved in making big decisions that have economic value, or that create economic value, or they can ruin economic value, are you going to be in a situation where agents are going to be 100% autonomous? And I don't know if this is exactly the point he's making here, but humans will always be involved. Okay, we'll be right back. We're going to welcome, as I mentioned earlier, Gabriela Mauch, the Chief Customer Officer and Head of ActivTrak Productivity Lab. We'll be right back. Okay, Gabriela, thank you so much for coming and joining us today. We want to talk to you about how companies are using data to understand artificial intelligence's real impact on employee productivity and well-being. But before we do that, can you just give us a little bit about ActivTrak Productivity Lab so we have some context, yeah?
Sure. Michael, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation with you. A little bit about ActivTrak. We are a work intelligence platform. So we are in the business of helping organizations receive the data to understand how people and AI work together and whether or not those technology investments are paying off. The Productivity Lab is a component of ActivTrak that really takes on the challenge and the exciting pursuit of understanding those trends across our customer base and knowing what's going on in the world of work today and likely what's going to happen in the world of work in the future.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff changing right now. I spent a lot of time actually thinking about the impact of artificial intelligence, but technology in general terms on like what the future of work is going to be like, not to sound too trite. But I'm just curious about this. I've had a lot of conversations recently about how AI is becoming embedded in like day-to-day workflows, little bits and pieces, right? But starting to actually move quite fast. What are some of the concerns or some of the mistakes that companies make when they try to measure the impact on productivity? Because it's weird, right? In other words, humans are still doing a whole bunch of stuff and they're using the tech to enable stuff. But how do you measure like where the productivity comes in from a human perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the initial part of your question is where I'm going to start, and I'm going to have you remind me of the second part. But the question around where do people make mistakes around measuring impact is that they think they're measuring impact and they're not. So if we rewind that a little bit, what I mean when I say that is people oftentimes conflate adoption with impact.
Got it.
So the thing that I see happening on a daily basis is people eager to report how many people in their organization are using adoption. And don't get me wrong, adoption is the first step to getting to impact,
Yeah,
right?
it has to be.
You're not going to get the impact you want.
Right.
But the celebration of adoption, because you've misconstrued it as impact, is the most common mistake that I see across the organizations I speak with on a daily basis.
Yeah. So this, can I follow up on this? Because I think this is actually really interesting. And again, when I knew you were going to be on the show, I started spending time on thinking about like, what does this really mean? Because adoption, you're right, is the first step. Can I back up and ask you, like, what are the things that concern companies and enterprises about actually even just adopting the technology to begin with? And then we can talk about how they're actually measuring the impact. Because you're right. If you have like nobody using, let's just say agentic AI, and then 10 people start using it, that's not what you're celebrating. You're celebrating how much more productive has it made me? How much more business have I done? But how do you get people to adopt it in the first place? Like, is there fear? Is there concern when you talk to your enterprise style clients?
So one of the things that I am constantly reminding leaders to think about is how AI means something different to a different role. To one person, the introduction of AI can mean a complete threat to their entire job.
Yeah.
And to the next person, it means an acceleration to the quality of their work and maybe even the money that they make.
Right.
Right. And so it's really important to understand that the challenges as it relates to adoption really is role dependent. I think part of your question is how are companies even trying to drive adoption? Well, it depends on the role.
Yep.
If you're dealing with a role in which it's ridden with fear, well, then it's just getting people to understand how it can help them. If you're dealing with a role where it can accelerate the pace at which they go, there's a lot less investment that needs to go into adoption, because if that's going to make me more money, of course I'm going to adopt it.
Exactly.
Right? So I think the first step in organizations that are successfully driving adoption is understanding what it means to the stakeholder group and what type of AI tool you're implementing and what impact that has on the person, and then pursuing what adoption approach makes the most sense after that.
Can I tell you about my own personal experience with this? And it's a while ago, but I think it's actually kind of indicative of what it feels like. I was sitting on a portfolio trading desk in an equity business in Tokyo, at Goldman Sachs. And I knew as we were starting to implement algorithmic trading that was going to automate me out of a job. Like, I knew it, but I still did it because, again, in the interim period of time where we were implementing and doing this stuff, it did actually help me make a lot more money. But at some point, it made me gone. Anyway, but I do understand this distinction between, like, oh my God, if I'm a salesperson and I can do more sales calls and do more research and understand my sales, my clients better, I'm going to make more money. I'm using as much technology as I possibly can. Yeah.
And I think it's a perfect example of the second type of role I described, obviously, which is why you're sharing the story. But if you think about the other role,
Mm-hmm.
the role that says, I'm not making more money, I don't have any other work to do, I'm not sure I have an additional skill set to give this business, the fear in the immediate term is significantly more heightened than the fear that you felt, which, sure, this will take my job. In the meantime, I'm going to ride this wave and make a lot more money off of it.
Yep.
Drastically different experiences.
For sure. Like, I was medium term concerned. Long term, I was sure what was going to happen. And I actually, I lost my job at some point, but that was 6 or 7 years later. Actually more, 10 years later. But I saw it coming. But you're right. Like, the medium term and the short term fear was not a big problem for me at all. But there were other people who the technology just crushed them. And yeah, it can get kind of scary. But the other thing too, can I tell you about impact, if you don't mind, from my side? And then you can tell me how you guys measure it, because I think it was kind of cool. We went from doing about, I would say, $500 or $600 million a day of business to about $3 billion. So like 5 times the amount of business that we did, because we could automate a whole bunch of stuff. I saw the face you made. You're like, really? Yeah.
Out of skepticism, out of just magnitude, right? That's wild. And how many more people did you do it with, or did you stay the same?
Zero.
Did you keep? So I'm gonna pick at it on you in this case, though. Is 0 more people, or did you end up having less people?
So we again, during this sort of short to medium term period of time, we didn't fire anybody. We actually hired a couple more people. And this is this kind of story that I like to tell to people as well, because a lot of people do have fear, but you're right, it bifurcates, right? Because on the one hand, if the technology is going to eliminate your necessity, then that's going to be bad. But if it gives you more productivity, and we can talk about this from the impact side, you're going to need more people to do more stuff. And that was kind of what we saw. Our business did not shrink because technology was implemented. It actually grew quite a bit, because we also grew the P&L from $8 million to $135 million. So you had to have more people around to be able to do that. Anyway, but that's just my personal experience. I don't like to generalize from mine, but I'm curious, so once you understand that there's adoption, then how do you deal with, how do you know that there's impact, but also how do you know if the impact is coming from the humans that are being more productive or just the technology? Do you know what I mean?
Of course. It's a good question. One of the things that we pride ourselves on here within the Productivity Lab and across ActivTrak's business is evolving this thinking from workforce intelligence to work intelligence. And in that evolution comes an understanding that we have to measure agents and we have to measure people. And over time, we will see a greater integration between the two. So measuring impact starts with measuring the 2 biggest units of work, or units of agents that perform that work, one of which is more of an agentic solution and the other of which is a human solution. When we think about that measurement and how we measure impact, the next piece that's really foundational to the way that we think about this topic is impact needs to be measured not only through the lens of efficiency and output and speed, but also through the lens of the workforce impact, the impact on the person, the impact on the culture, the impact on the environment.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, we look at things like burnout and disengagement alongside speed at which work is getting done. What's doing that work? It's not always who's doing that work anymore. What's doing that work and how is it improving the quality or the output or the speed of that as well? So that's at a high level. I'm going to let you double click on where you want to go from there. But for us, big takeaways is the fact that you're looking at the agent and the human now for work intelligence rather than workforce intelligence. And you're looking at the impact on the person as well as the impact on the quality and the efficiency of the work.
So just for the viewers and listeners that may not be just as deeply into this as we are, right? Can we just define what the difference is between workforce intelligence? I think it's obvious or it's clear to me, but I want to make it clear to everybody else, and work intelligence. And tell me if I'm wrong, but isn't there sort of a hybrid here as well, where it's kind of workforce intelligence, you know what I mean? Because in the cases where the agent is working together with a human and both of them are doing like really great stuff, well, then it's workforce and work intelligence at the same time. Do I have that wrong?
It depends how you define it, which is why I think you're asking me the question.
Yeah.
When we say work, we say agent plus human equals. They're both performing work.
Right.
So we wrap that into work intelligence. Workforce intelligence is really focused on the human.
Yeah.
And so to answer your question, for decades, we've been focused on the workforce. What's the impact on the workforce? What's the impact on the workforce? With the agent and the human, it rolls up into what we consider work intelligence. All of the activity that takes place within an organization that is energy to get a particular output to drive that business forward.
Got it. Okay. I like this. Can we talk about this impact on people and on the culture? I hadn't thought about the cultural side of this, right? Because the culture is really just an amalgamation of like how people feel at work every day and the group of people that with whom you're working every day. I'm super curious, right? Again, because for us, we became more productive. We were running a different business. But if you're just sitting in a regular institutional business or incumbent business in the United States or frankly anywhere in the world, and you introduce this really powerful and transformational technology, it has to change the way you feel at work. Is there a way you can measure that as well? So we'll get to the impact in a second and the efficiencies and stuff. But like you have to get up and go to work every day and be motivated and stuff like that. How does it change the way people feel about the stuff that they're doing? And I know it's different for every job, but just like in general.
Yeah. So you're a master at squeezing 3 questions into one.
I'm sorry. I'm so curious. I'm so curious. I can't help it. I know I should be better at that, but
I want to answer all of them. So keep me honest in how I break them apart.
Thank you.
The first part of your question is how do you measure it,
Yeah.
right? We measure it here at ActivTrak by looking at how the workforce's behavior changes as the adoption and the use of AI goes up. So as we see a greater adoption of AI across a particular organization, we then see, this is an example, employees work harder as that adoption goes up. We see employees log off earlier. We see employees sign online later. We see employees take longer breaks. I just gave you 3 back-to-back that were more negative than positive unintentionally. The point is that we look at the behavior change as the adoption goes up.
Got it.
Now, organizations will supplement that with survey data and certainly collect the sentiment. But what we want to see and what we're particularly interested in is as that AI adoption goes up, do the workers' behaviors as it pertains to productivity end up changing?
Right.
So the second part of your question is around, what type of impact can AI adoption have? I'm going to use impact in a different way now, right? What type of impact can AI adoption have on the culture of an organization? I will this is probably the 3rd time I've done it in this chat, and I'll probably do it 3 more times before we close out. But I've got to emphasize the fact that different roles adopt AI for different reasons, which is having different impact on that worker. If AI has come in and it has displaced what I do and I no longer have a skill set to contribute, and I come to work significantly less motivated on a daily basis. The person down the hall from me has a very, very different day when it's only accelerated the type of the work that they couldn't stand doing, and now they're doing more of what they love.
Right.
Different people are coming to work with a very different experience as a result of something that all fits under this AI umbrella that can look very, very different.
Yeah. God, I have so many more questions. You're going to hate me for this, but it's so interesting because now I'm thinking, let's say there's a group of 5 people and I'm just going to make up stuff, right? Doing role A. and they're not benefiting so much from the artificial intelligence, and maybe they are getting disintermediated by it. And then there's role B, where it's just like, oh my God, now I'm superpowered. Is there also a reallocation of resources inside of these organizations where they say, maybe we need, I'm going to say 60% less of role A, but we need 40% more of role B, because if we can have more people being way more productive, we can make more money, but we don't need whatever role A is, if it's a support role or an operational role. Do you see that reallocation of resources as well?
Those are the organizations that are thinking about it the right way.
Okay.
So the organization that thinks about it the right way has a deep appreciation for what institutional, not the cost of institutional knowledge,
Yeah.
and the richness of the people that already exist within their organization. And they're thinking about things like org design. How can I redeploy my talent? And upskilling. How can I upskill them? Because even though they might not be a perfect fit for that spot over there that's going to have 10 open headcount by the end of the year, investment in upskilling them is way cheaper than my need to go recruit additional people and onboard them and teach them the X company ways, right? And so those organizations that are doing this right are thinking a lot about what their strategy is around redeployment, reallocation, and upskilling while maintaining the institutional knowledge that already exists.
I like it. Does it change the type of people that actually get hired, right? Because again, let's go back to this example of like role A and role B. If you need 60% less, right? And I'm just doing like 20, 40, 60, like 3 less people, you may try to upskill them, but maybe they don't even want to do role B. Maybe they have found some other work somewhere else. But when you bring new people into role B, are you hiring different types of people who already may have some sort of technical skills? If you know what I mean. And let me give you an example. When I was sitting on the trading desk, we started hiring, originally we just hired guys and gals that just had like a gut feel about the market. But the more we used technology to trade, the more likely we were to hire, like, not firing anybody, but if somebody left, we'd probably replace them with a PhD in mathematics or computer science, because then they could be way more efficient and effective at using the technology because they knew how it worked better. Are you seeing that type of change in hiring as well?
I'm not seeing that type of change. And I think, your anecdote is, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that it's indicative of just how fast these tools are moving in terms of them not requiring someone who's highly sophisticated and know how the tool works, right? I log into Claude and I feel cool when I see all the code start popping up, sort of like it gives me the ability to click a button to debug something. I'm like, I don't know how to debug something, right? But you don't need high levels of proficiency in how a tool works today. You do need, so I'm going to get back to your question, you do need someone who really holds themselves accountable to the critical thinking and the gut check on the work that is coming out, right? And they value speed with quality, and they value the fact that their name is still on that work. No one's going to go and have a coaching conversation with the agent in a way that they would with a human, right? And so to your question, have I seen a change in the talent as a result of, do you have the skill set to interact with an agent or run an agent? I haven't personally seen that. That doesn't mean it's not happening. But if I were to look into the future, I would say my advice to organizations that are thinking about hiring are looking at individuals that have the humility to learn and to adjust based on what agentic capabilities are coming their way, because they're coming fast.
Yeah, I mean, we use them in our business as well, and they're coming faster than, like, you're right. This evolution that we're seeing here. And I've seen so many tech cycles, right? This new thing comes out, that new thing comes out, but this is moving way faster than anything else I've ever seen. And I'm sure faster than anything else you've ever seen. Does it also mean, you're just engendering so many questions in my mind, but does it also mean that the management style, not just of senior management, but again, as a person who's doing job B, I was never really managing anybody else, but now I have all this agentic AI that's helping me do stuff. I have to manage that too at some level. Do you know what I mean? So how do you teach those people, or how do you understand like their interaction with the agent as well and the impact on them?
So I already told you I'd say it 3 more times.
Go for it.
The expectation really sits with, what are you using the agent for? Are you using the agent to drive to your decisions? In which case the expectation from a manager needs to be, you might have gotten assistance on that decision, but you need to be able to explain why we made that decision and give the quality control oversight of the decisions that are being made.
Yeah.
If the agentic solution is being used to purely automate the work, that's a little bit different, right?
Yep.
And maybe the expectation is that you're looking at that outcome in a higher volume and making decisions on how you change the coding to that automated work. I think the piece that really will come into question over the next year, I was going to say 5, but in light of the pace that we both acknowledged,
Exactly.
the next year, the expectation will be that managers really have to wrestle with the word accountability. And they've always had to wrestle with that word accountability. But I think that what will happen is, expecting people to go faster because they have AI at the same time you need to hold them accountable for the quality of the output is going to be a wrestle, right?
Yeah.
It's I'm trying to think of my early days in consulting where, you were never allowed to just say, well, that's what the model told me. You had to explain exactly how the model worked and why the model said that and what assumptions were made. And I don't think that that's going to go away. I think that onus is still going to be on the human that oversees that work.
Yeah. Again, I'll give you a perfect example of this. We built out algorithms. So, mathematical representations of how the market was supposed to trade. But just because you press the button and put all the trades into the algo, and sometimes there were thousands of trades in there, your customer would ask you, like, why did it do that? You couldn't just be like, I don't know, the algo decided. Like, it wasn't good enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not good enough. And I have a really hard time. There's such a component to this conversation and all the conversations around this topic that really just dabbles into the human condition, right? You can't blame a piece of technology in a way that you can hold a human accountable.
Right. So do we have any data? Because I want to end on culture, right? Because I think that's really important, like overall company culture, but I don't want to go there yet. I want to finish there. But do we have any data on the well-being side, right? And again, just another sort of anecdotal example. There was a time when I first joined the business at Goldman Sachs where I was literally the only person doing the trading.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, for like 7 months, everything that needed to get executed on that trading desk, I did. And I cannot tell you like how much my hand hurt and my arm hurt at the end of the day. Like it was, like it was real. What is it called? Carpal tunnel syndrome.
That sounds right.
But but it really did, like over time, like in the first month, it wasn't that bad. By the second month, it was like, what's going on here? By month number 7, I literally went to my boss. I'm like, dude, I'm going to die if we don't hire someone to help me. So it really did impact my well-being. And I'm just curious. You're laughing at me like you deserved it. But anyway, it's okay. I probably did. But do we have any data on like how this stuff is impacting well-being? Because it matters, right?
Of course it matters, right? These are the people that I just said we need to hold accountable, right? To make sure the work is right. If they're burned out or if they're disengaged, those holding people accountable it almost becomes irrelevant. They don't care at that point, or they're too exhausted to do better work. And the data that we see is that, we have curbed a bit of that burnout problem, but we have curbed that burnout problem in exchange for a bit more of a disengagement problem as well.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so what we see and what we hope to see kind of normalize over the upcoming year is that we're not risking people disengaging because some of that work is being taken away, and that those who are adopting AI tools aren't at risk of burning out because their capacity hasn't been changed. They've just been expected to do more.
Yeah.
So both of these things can happen. I think what we saw when we looked at in our data, AI adopters versus non-AI adopters, we saw those AI adopters work a little bit more than those AI non-adopters, which isn't necessarily what you would expect, right? I think a lot of the value proposition around AI adoptions, you can do your work faster. Now there's this assumption that maybe people are doing it faster, but being expected to do more. There's a lot to see here in the next year. I don't expect these things, I'm going to use the comparison of what remote work like the first 6 months of COVID versus what remote work looks like now.
Yeah.
Remote work is a great solution for a lot of organizations who want the right talent, and it's distributed. But heck, the way it looked in the first 6 months of COVID looks nothing like how effective it is now.
Right.
And that takes time, right? And so I really think that what we see right now, I would not call it a problem. I would call it a growing pain that's coming with something coming exceptionally fast. And organizations need to be cognizant of how they're going to go about reallocating work as a result of the efficiencies that they've. Right now, we're in gold mine land, right? It's just like really exciting efficiencies. And we haven't quite figured out how to design around them just yet. But when we measure it, we can.
Yeah, so this is super interesting. We should point this out to people, the viewers and the listeners to the show. We're in such early innings here. Do you know what I mean? Like you and I are talking about this like we've had 5 to 15 years of data when really we kind of just have months of data in a way, right? It's still indicative of like some trend, but the analogy that you made or the comparison that you made to COVID is so right. Like people literally like took their laptops and went home and they were like, okay, now be productive at home. And like your dog's there, your grandmother may live with you. And it was just a complete mess at the beginning, but over time, everybody got way better at it. And then some people actually should have come back and wanted to come back to work. And other people were like, I'm 10 times more productive here. I'm going to do it this way. But it took a while to figure that out. And I think it's going to take a while to figure this stuff out too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Can we just end on company culture? And you, again, have a better frame of reference than I do for this. But if we just think about the reallocation of resources and all the things we've talked about must have an impact on the overall company culture. One, if like the humans that you're hiring are different, but two, if the roles that they're doing are different, if there's burnout, if there's difference in their well-being and stuff like that. And it's true, not just at the, what I'll call the line level, but at the management level as well, right? Because the way people are working is changing and it's changing really fast. What is the impact or the expected impact you think on company culture? And then I'll let you go.
I think the expected impact on company culture is going to be a reflection of what your current leadership culture is and your current leadership style and your current business strategy. My belief is that AI net is absolutely fantastic for the ability to innovate, iterate, collaborate, and do better, faster work. But better, faster work in an environment where it's either already hostile or you don't understand how that work connects to the business's direction just feels really loud and really chaotic.
Yeah.
But if you do better, faster work in an environment where your leadership has plotted a course that makes sense, is exciting, and is going to benefit the entire organization, well, this is just a culture enhancer or a multiplier of a good culture. At the end of the day, AI is a solution, right, that is intended to make work, to enhance work. That work needs to still be a reflection of your business strategy and your business's direction and leadership style, and everything else becomes amplified based on that.
Got it. Okay. I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for coming and doing this today. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did.
Thanks, Michael.
Okay, that's it for AGTP Daily today. Thank you again for joining us. Give us a thumbs up on the video, subscribe to the channel on YouTube, and follow us on all of our socials, on X, on Instagram, and on LinkedIn. Let us know in the comments on any of those platforms if there's anything you'd like us to discuss on our upcoming shows. We'd love to do more AMA style stuff where you're asking me direct questions about things that are occurring in the technology world. If you want my opinion or just my stance on some stuff, that would be great. My name is Michael Waits. Bye for now.